So we normally record these sessions and we put them on YouTube. So in case you want to listen to it again or if you missed a point, you can check them on YouTube within 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 week. But anyway, I'm joking. 3 days maximum, then you'll find it on YouTube. So without further ado, you can, Frank, take the floor.
Thank you so much, and thanks for to everyone that's joining. I'm happy to meet you all today. My name is Frank Ojwang, and I wear many hats. First, I'm a parent, and my authorship was actually inspired from a very parental perspective. And of course, today I am joining the lounge as an author, which is another hat that I wear and that I'll be wearing throughout my stay at the lounge today. I'm also a scholar, I'm a social scientist, and I write about various issues that I do research on in the social science space, where I'm always looking a lot more at things that affect African migrants specifically. So the integration aspect, education, labor market, and basically how we can achieve holistic integration. And then, of course, I have leadership roles in two seuras here in Finland. I also professionally I coordinate a program, a network at the University of Uvascular, where among other roles I hold, I'm a fundraiser as well. I do have community engagements as well. One of my other hats in Kenya, which is my home country. I sit in boards for people with disability or just uh, marginalized groups and their activities there. We have some of the informal settlements, and I'm heavily involved in fundraising for their interventions and programs. And of course, I have for the last 3 years, I've been having a small project funded by Helsinki City, which is supporting families with special needs kids, and basically it's supporting them with information on what special needs families sort of endure or go through primarily by lack of knowledge or lack of information. And this also came through interactions with a friend that I met who had a child who had special needs, and they were feeling frustrated by the social services and basically the system. And so I thought it would be nicer for me to understand what this really entails and get those parents together for them to have this conversation and get to help each other. And of course, I advocate or champion for social justice through my scholarship and just through some of the things that I write. And indirectly, my authorship, or actually the story that I wrote was also in a way just responding to some of the things, and that's where writing our own story comes in. We have a lot of stories that we have in the Finnish space, especially for our children. They're reading a lot of books, which is a very nice thing and a very good opportunity that we have in Finland. We have libraries in every corner of Finland, and this is accessible to families. And so I thought that I could also make a contribution by writing a book, writing our stories told to us when we were younger, in a way that would be palatable for children, but also in a way that can show all the readers that heroes are not just Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and these white and heroes, but we also have African heroes, and they also have superpowers, and they also did certain things that are unique, and we need to own these stories there that came from our parents, from our grandparents, and as Africans, it has always been that our stories are passed on orally. So from one generation to the next, it was always orally passed, and most of these stories are not necessarily in books. And so I was thinking this could also inspire others to also put stories, our stories, in our own books, so that then we can also own some of our stories, write our stories, and own them, because the themes of our stories are similar to the themes in every other story that we read, from the Superman story, where we see the Superman being the superhero there. My story also, we see Lwanda Magere coming in and being a superhero in his community, and defending it and having some superpowers that is unique, that his powers are in his shadow. You know, when we read the story of Samson in the
You
Bible,
might have the wrong.
yeah, so his power, Samson's power was in his hair, and other people are having powers in different places. And so in this particular story, the power is in his shadow. But yes, that's about me in a nutshell, and a bit of how the story book came up. So the storybook was actually a response to many questions that I kept having by neighbors at home in Helsinki and also colleagues. And the question was always, do your kids speak mother tongue? Do your kids speak their mother tongue? And it was interesting that it had not hit me how important it was for my kids to speak mother tongue until I was in Finland, that we had a subject called mother tongue. And then I realized how much we had been socialized, that learning, English as a language was far much more important. And so coming to have this question come from so many people was kind of always awakening something in me, that why were they constantly asking me if my kids could speak their mother tongue. And then one of the times there was a project by Think Africa that was teaching about education system in Finland. I can't remember the name of the project, maybe Omapolku or something, but it was having this forum where parents were receiving information. And then at that forum, I met Hope. Hope Nwasu is known to a good number of you, I'm sure. And Hope was talking to her kids in mother tongue. And that was kind of really challenging for me. And I asked her, how do you do this? And so when she told me that, I can just start at that particular point and start teaching my kids mother tongue, I actually went all out, and we did videos, and we have them on YouTube. Of course, it's a private space for our family, but we do have my kids learning, and I wanted them to be watching themselves instead of watching other things and stuff. And that's how I also came about writing the story of Lwanda Magere, which is a story in my mother tongue. So the initial book that I wrote was actually in my mother tongue. And so when I presented it to the publisher, they said, we want wider readership. And so we cannot publish a book in your mother tongue. It has to be in English. And that's when I translated the book into English. And then we produced the book, Lwanda Magere. But then the inspiration was actually birthed from the point of being able to also know your mother tongue, to learn your mother tongue, and be able to speak. Of course, we didn't catch up, and we didn't catch up to learn our mother tongue. Reason being, there was Finnish language, which was new, and then before long, there was Spanish language introduced, and Kenyans, we have Swahili outside of English and our mother tongue, and so this was just too much, but I'm glad we still have the book. But yeah, that gives a history of how the book came up. And so my kids enjoy the story, and yeah.
Frank, would you tell us what challenges you got when writing the book, especially in Finland, when you're not home? What are some of the challenges that you met?
Yeah, I think writing the book first, it was a lot more initially based on recall. And then I had to find people to ask more questions about some of the gaps that were in the story from my perspective. And of course, everybody has a version of this story because it's been passed orally for generations, and of course, in so many different contexts. And so there are some common trends or some common storylines that are paternalistic in the story, and those are the ones that I sort of gathered. and put together. And then for the rest, I also try to throw in my own rendition into the storybook, so that as everybody was giving a different version of the story, but with a common trend or a common pattern when it comes to the themes, I maintain the thematic focus of the story, that we have this hero and he's having this superpower and he's saving his community, and how betrayal comes in through, a lady who's pretty and from another, enemy community and stuff. So the common storyline is maintained, but of course there are just a little bit of twists here and there that to build the plot or to really make it also enjoyable for the readers, based on just the context of the time, the contemporary times. And so the challenge, of course, was I'm in Finland and I'm gathering these stories from Kenya, and we have to, get folks to interview. Getting the right people was quite a challenge on basically who to interview, because those who could give the story in the right detail are not on WhatsApp, or probably are not having the phones. And so someone else has to check with them or ask them and gather that information and share it with me. And I have to gather the same from a couple of other people through the same means before I can actually compare the stories and look at the commonalities. So getting this, because I was now getting it through somebody else and then reviewing all of them and getting the common pattern, may have been a challenge, in the sense that if I had done it myself, probably would have done it or interpreted the whole storyline or narrations from the individuals differently. But still, I think I captured the story quite well. And of course, the whole publishing process is quite a lengthy process, and it requires resources. And I think so many people could actually write and may just be derailed by the resources, because before you publish, at the onset, unless you secure funding, a lot of times you need to foot a lot of the costs by yourself. Yeah, it took about 3 years just going through the whole process. And you see, this requires patience, and this requires resources, and this requires verifications, because they were also the people who were reviewing the book and giving feedback and asking me to counter check certain facts that were in the story and that they also felt needed to be verified and stuff. And of course, I also added new characters, basically to just build up the story. And so it was always that I'm also being careful not to erode the whole, the frame of the story. So I would say those are some of the key challenges that, one faces when writing a book. And I, of course, faced those that I had to grapple with them. Yes.
You mentioned about the publishing process, and
Yes.
I'm sure most of us who are thinking about writing, I'm sure they would like to hear a bit more about it. So if you could expand, like what steps should they take or how to go about it?
Yeah, first I'd encourage most of us to write our stories, especially those of us from Africa. We do have stories, and I think we should write them. First, we can just write them and even post them in some of these free blog spaces that we can create and put the stories there. But the whole publishing process, and now I'll be using Recall, I think it starts by you identifying potential publishers. And I used one of the best publishing houses in Kenya. And the reason for that was because I know, one, they can promote the book and they can promote it at an institutional level. And they have actually done that. And they can also promote it at other levels beyond the institutions. And they can recommend it as a book for reading for certain grades in schools. And that's been done, that schools actually buy the book for certain grades to read. And that's been done in quite a number of schools across Kenya. And So of course I was strategic in who I want to pick as a publisher. There are a number of them that anyone could always pick, and of course everybody can look at things including cost. You need to know how much it would cost. You need to understand their processes, their quality control systems, their quality, their visibility. And of course, once you've selected a publisher, then by then usually you have your script already ready. So then if they accept, because you initially share a synopsis of the story. So if that is accepted, then you share the whole story, and then they have some internal review processes. They have to go through it. They have to look at, the language, the editorials, the things before it actually goes to their editors. And it's at that stage that they can also raise some questions if they have them. Like this was a story from a community, the Luo community, and so they engage some of the Luo experts that they have within their committee of reviewers to also look at it. Look at the story and see if it's actually resonating with the actual story. And that's how you also get constructive feedback. And you use the feedback to fill in some of the gaps. And of course, some of the comments are things you can clarify, that I'm adding this character basically because of this gap, and because we cannot find something for this space, then we will have these retained. But of course, the key characters remain with their original names. So once you go through the review process, then there is the graphics phase, and you have to show them like where do you want to have the graphics put and which kind of graphics do you have in mind, and then you have to describe, like in this particular place or space we want to have this kind of graphic. And you'd always, like the cover, you can see the kind of graphic you have, and they would share with you a number of them. And even within the book, there are actually a number of images that are really sort of telling about this, that makes the reader to visualize, especially because this is meant for children. You want the images that are depicted to make the reader to visualize and also relate and be in that particular space as they read it. And then once you are done with those processes, then there's the final proofreading and verification and some internal approval process, which is on the side of the publisher. And then once the agreement is done, then the production goes on. So something that I may need to mention is actually you also have an agreement with them. As soon as they accept your synopsis, there's a contract that you sign with them, and it also spells out how you are going to have the book promoted, the publishing, the selling plans, and all that. So yeah, once the production is done, then now you go to the distribution and marketing and so forth. And now that's where choosing a good publishing house helps, because then I published through the Longhorn, which is kind of a big publishing house in Kenya. And so in all the book fairs and in all these events and with their promotional of their books in the schools and so forth, they take care of all this, which was actually in the agreement. So they also send the books to the bookstores and have them stocked through those. And from those particular bookstores, for instance, I can actually see the buyers, where the buying happens, like most of because they also do delivery. So I can see where the books are delivered or where the people buy over the counter. Then you can see, okay, there's these ones over the counter. But yeah, I think that's sort of the process. And of course, for me, because I was writing this to inspire my kids, but also to inspire everybody else to write the different stories that we have. I wanted to bring it to Finland. And so that's how the two sizes of the books come in. The books that are meant for Finland it's really big compared to the one we have being distributed in Kenya, because the Finnish books are usually nice, big books, and you enjoy holding and reading them and so forth. But for affordability, because this was meant to reach as many people as possible, then the Kenyan book, we have the small book that is being distributed at a very affordable price that any school can actually afford to buy it as a school, but also individual families can buy it for their kids as birthday gifts and those kind of processes. But yeah, so the publishing process through to how the distribution happens is kind of like that in a nutshell. So if anyone is thinking of doing this, I think they can consider that trail, that you identify the publisher, have an agreement with them, and then finalize, give the script, have the script finalized, then the production, and then based on the publisher, you also have agreement or discussions around the distribution. And of course, for distributions in Finland, once I had the books, I went to they are called Kirja something. I'm forgetting the name, but we have the libraries in Finland order their books from Kirja Justus Oy, I think. So then I sent the big books to Kirja Justus Oy, that particular company, and then it is through the Kirja Justus Oy that the books are then distributed. I see the books now being promoted through Prisma, through Adlibris, through many other bookstores. But I know my agreement is actually with just one outlet, the Kirja Justus company. So that's about the process. And it's the Kirja Justus that actually sold the book to the libraries. So they get the repository or orders from the libraries, and then they give it to the libraries.
Yeah, it's nice. You've actually answered the next question, which I wanted to ask, like, how was the book received here in Finland, and the platform and the media? Like, did you get like a good, or did you get like a pushback, or were they willing to embrace the book with the different culture? And then what will you say about that?
Yeah, so one interesting thing that happened was before I wrote the book, I had already reached out to Audi Library and to Pasila Library, and I told them that I'm working on this book. And at that point, I was actually reaching out to them to support the production of the book. So not really for library related stocking. And they told me, we don't actually do that. We can connect you with the Kirja Justus Oy, and then they can explain to you how that works. But we can buy the book once you've produced it. And so that was like 2 years, before the book actually came out. So once they told me that, and I checked with the company, and they told me, yes, we cannot support you in that way. We cannot fund it. But once the book is out, you bring it to us, and then we will take care of the distribution within Finland and also in the other Nordic countries. And so I went ahead and just, handled the other productions. I covered the cost of producing the books. And then once it was ready, 2 years later, I went back. Luckily, the same manager was still there. And I was like, oh, hi, you remember our conversation? Let's pick it up. Now the book is ready. And I would like to give it to the libraries. And can you remind me that process? Because then I could not remember the Kirja Justus at that point. And then they told me, oh, that's great. Now go to the Kirja Justus and have the books with them, and then we will make an order. And so I went to them. They gave me a form. Then we just had some brief discussion about the book, and they wanted to understand how, thematically relevant it is, and how it would be for the readers. And once they went through that, they were like, oh, this is okay, it's acceptable, let's take them in. And so they took the first bunch of books and did the distribution. And I started seeing them in libraries. Of course, I could check a few, or I could see a few of my books in a few libraries, and I could always order the book just because just to test that the book was actually available. And one thing I actually noticed was anytime you ask for the book, most of the libraries didn't know about it that much. And so they'll just say it's not there, you know. So you have to know that they always have a common repository when they have new books that you can always ask that, could you check in the common repository or something like that so that it's ordered and sent to me. So when you make it that clear, then they always go that extra mile and make the order, and then it comes. But then they have them centrally somewhere. I know it's in Joensuu, I know it's in Uvascula, I know it's been in Helsinki a few times because I've tried to order through those spaces and I've actually gotten the book in those areas. But if you ask any person just randomly in the library, they'll always say, no, we still don't have it. So you have to go the extra mile. And I think maybe it's because they're still having a bit of a dry run with it and getting the feedback or something. But yes, we have it in the libraries now in Finland, in Sweden, in Iceland. I think they have distributed in that sense that those other libraries also took a few copies.
Okay. We have a question from Lubika who is asking, who made the illustration for the book and how was the cooperation with the illustrator? How did it go?
Yeah, so because I published through an established company, the company has its own illustrators in-house. And so once we got to the stage of doing the illustrations, I had a focal point that I was engaging with. So I didn't even engage with the illustrator actually. So what happens is I point out in which part of the book I want which illustration. And remember, illustrations are also charged separately. So it's the number of illustrations that you have, also have prizes assigned to them. And so those are things you pre-agree on at the agreement stage. But the illustrator, when he sent the images, I was instantly like, wow, because I felt, you know, for the kind of audience I wanted to read the book, especially because of the plot. I wanted the African plot captured. I wanted the African way of doing things in those days reflected. I felt they got it right. So of course they would send them to me to review and approve or give comments, and I would say, oh, this one, can we add a few more cows here that they're grazing actually a number? Can we have someone sitting on the back of a cow? Because that's how boys in the village, you know, herding their cattle would always be playing around and stuff and so forth. So with the illustrator, the company took care of it from behind the scenes, but I just made sure that it was reflecting what I would actually want to be projected when the younger readers are going or reading the book. Yes.
Okay.
So the company provides the illustrator and you engage through a focal point. But of course, this could also vary. They also have the option where you can have your own illustrator. Of course, I didn't have my own, so it was easier to rely on theirs.
Okay. Also, Lubika is asking if you know about other African authors here in Finland who are writing stories or books in English language.
Yes, I know Wendell Luvinga. I've met Malaika. I know I've met quite a few others as well in some of these functions at the Audi Library. So, yeah, I do know a few. But of course, I'd like to know more, and I still I keep my options open, and I'm always glad to meet them whenever we have these forums where authors come together.
Okay. And Teresia is asking, she missed the name of the company that does the distribution to the libraries.
Within
If
Finland?
you can write it, or you can also send it to me. I can put it in the WhatsApp group, or if.
Yes, and actually they have changed their name this month. So initially they were called Kyriela Stews Oi, but now they're called Story something. I can just get it and send it to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Teresia, I will send it to you, or I will put it in the Think Africa WhatsApp group. Hannah is asking, Could
Yes.
artificial intelligence tools help aspiring authors with the cost of book publishing, like AI?
Come again. Sorry, I missed that.
Could artificial intelligence
Mhm.
tools help aspiring authors with the cost of book publishing?
I think it could, but then with these stories, we want authenticity and we want the humane feel in the way they were told. And I think we want to have, that's where the ownership comes in. When we have the AI-led narration or construction of the story, it would be colorful, it would be beautiful, you know. It would probably write better than a way a human would put it all together. But I think the ownership element of it, and uh, we need to own our stories. And when we own our stories, we need to write them in the way that we would have told them ourselves, in the way that we would have wished to have them narrated. And while I would say AI would make it maybe easier, more convenient, and even cheaper in that sense, but then the ownership, the authenticity is really the flavor in the story. And so for me, it would be that if we are writing our own stories, let us try as much as possible to retain the authenticity and use our own words to narrate and tell that story.
Okay. Ekaterina also is asking, have you gotten any feedback from the readers from the other Nordic countries?
Yes, I have some good responses from Sweden, and maybe that's because I have quite a number of friends there that promoted the book a lot from within their friends. And so uh, the feedback has been one positive because people are inspired by just the fact that we put this story into a book, especially for those who have heard about it from way back. They are just happy that this story has moved from the oral narration part of it into a book, and so they're sure the story will stay on, you know, into perpetuity. And for me, that was good feedback. And of course, I mean, the story uh, cannot miss something that, you know, that might need to be improved or something. So if everybody would read it, they would pick something here and there. But by and large, the feedback has been that yes, this is actually the story, and we are enjoying it, and it's fun when they are reading it with their kids, because most people take it and read it with their kids. And I mean, that was the whole idea. It was supposed to be a family book that you read together with the kids or for the kids, and as you tell the stories. So yes, from Sweden, there's good feedback. Not quite from Iceland. I haven't had much from them, but I see the statistics on the borrowing, and they have quite a few books, and it's always fully booked from there as well. So that when you go to the library, there's always some 2 weeks wait time for you before it gets to you because someone has it. So I think that's also just good feedback, even if I haven't seen any written feedback or gotten quite a feedback from an individual. But it's always out of the library, so I know that's good feedback in itself.
Yeah. Lubika has this question. Do you think about any public reading of your book in some libraries or during some cultural events?
Yes, I do, and I've actually reached out to a few libraries and told them that whenever they are having events, I'm happy to go and also, as an author, read it. But I've also wanted to have an audio book. This was actually requested by the Kirjalaistyus, the same company that is selling the books in Finland. That actually asked me to also have the audiobooks, and the book, one of the things I wanted with the audiobook, that the narrator should be someone who has, and I know you'd understand this better, a Luo accent, a very deeply Luo accent, because this is a Luo story. Luo is the name of the ethnic tribe from which this story originates. And so it would be nice to have someone who has, because yeah, it would have the flavor that even if you are not from this tribe, but this is how people from this tribe speaks. It's the same way how the Indians speak when we are imitating them, and or when how the Spanish folks speak when they are speaking English. These people are very nice, and so you want the story, the audiobooks also told by people with that accent, and I haven't quite found someone who would do that. And the book that published it in Kenya uh, gave me a few people to consider, and of course, I'm looking into that as well. So yes, I would love to read the books at the library whenever those sort of forums come, and I've given them that olive branch. But I'm also having the idea that we could have an audiobook as well, so that people could actually listen to this story from an audiobook told with this nice Luo accent. And the Luo people are grandiose, and they're this very flashy and happy people. And so that would need to be projected in the audiobook.
Is it like a paid gig or volunteer job?
That would be on a volunteer basis, more or less, yeah.
But that is a chance. If we have any Luos in the house, that is a chance to market yourself. You might end up in Hollywood one day. So, because we have the voice actors too.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you think you're going to write another book?
I've actually wanted to write another book because we have so many stories, and we need to have those stories moved into books and told and being archived in formats that we can always have them forever, because a number of them, one, are already distorted. I'm sure the version we are having is probably a distorted version of what the story was many hundred years ago. And with every generational change, we lose some of the stories. And so when I find time, that's the only thing I lack. But if I were able to find time and more resources, of course, then I would always write another story. I would gather the facts behind some of these very common stories and write it again in a way that it would be fun for younger readers. I think my focus is a lot more on the younger readers, because they're the ones who should get these stories, because these stories are part of their identity, and these stories are part of what should enshrine a sense of who they are to them. And so when they can identify a book or a story and link it with who they are, then to a fair extent, I feel that's a good thing.
One thing, when I was at like Familia, they were writing a book. They have a story book with Wendy. And I remember I also used to accompany my colleague to daycares to read like the prototype, just like to read for the daycares. Have you tried that, or is it like you have to have an NGO or a company backing you up?
Yeah, probably I haven't explored a number of things. I work full time, so that means between 8 and around 4:30. For a better part, I'm not available, because then I'm at work, and after work, I'm a doctoral researcher. I'm writing my dissertation now, for instance, and so it means I also don't have any extra time to commit to a lot of other things. But of course, once a lot of these are settled, I'd love to have or explore some of those possible opportunities. Like, I think it would be much more fun to read this to children in a kindergarten, for instance. If I go to the preschool, I could read it out to them and see their reaction. I think it would be so much more fun for me. I've had the honor of reading it to some kids at a birthday party, and it was really exciting to see how they were enjoying the story and how they kept looking at the photos, and how, they were thrilled by, the images and the storyline and the questions they were asking, like someone having powers in the shadow. Like, they would wonder, what about at night when the shadow is not there? And yeah. So, but of course, I'm open to all this. So it depends on the availability of time, and of course, if schools invite and I have the time, I'd be very happy to always honor that invite. But of course, I work, so there may be a catch in that. Yeah.
Lubika has another question. Talking about time, give me 1 minute. Talking about time, how long was the whole process from starting to write till the book was published?
Yeah, so the whole process, I'd say, took, I'd say about 2.5, 3 years. And I'd say 2.5, 3 years because remember when I started, when I was poked into teaching my kids mother tongue, I knew I couldn't teach my kids mother tongue alone. For me, that's not an effective way of teaching. So every time I find something that I feel is helpful, I always think of scaling it up or scaling it out. How do I make something that would be beneficial to my kids without making it entirely for them? Because if I make it for them, then they don't sort of feel it in that sense. But if I make it for all children, then they sort of identify with it and they also want to be a part of it in a sense. And so there was that part that is probably not relevant and counted. But when we were trying to tell stories, and I was trying to tell them in very simple words, because then their mother tongue was more or less near zero. And so simple words to make them understand. But then I thought of all children probably need this. So I could write a story for my children and give them the storybook. I just printed it with one of the printers here, but that wouldn't be fun. If it's at the library and they go to read a book by their dad, then it would be like awesome. They go and pull it from the shelf and and that sort of worked. It's the same way when I wanted to teach my kids Swahili. It's something that I knew they wouldn't learn more when it's just me and them. And so one time there was Kiswahili being offered to Kenyan and Tanzanian and the Swahili speaking countries. And so I offered to teach Swahili in that particular. I volunteered to teach Swahili in that group. And so my kids were learning Swahili in that group of kids. And for that, then they learn, because then it's for a broader team. And so this process, there's that bit that I may not count, because then somebody else may construct it differently. So from the point that I actually started writing to when it's produced, it's about 2 to 2.5 years. The whole back and forth, the whole scouting of the publisher, the whole, negotiating the agreement, agreeing on the terms of that agreement, the signing. They're not things that just happen instantly. There's always a lot of back and forth. So yeah, so it's a whole process. By the time you get the hard copy book, actually the sample, by the time you're getting the sample for approval, it's always 2 years. And remember, the publisher was in Kenya. I have to approve a physical copy. And that means at that point in time, I have to plan my travel in a way that by the time I'm in Kenya, the book sample is ready so that I can actually see it and approve it. And so, yeah, it took about 2.5 years to have the whole thing complete. Yeah. But of course, it could take a shorter time if someone accelerates things. And I think with other publishing houses that are not as rigorous in their processes, it could actually move faster. I also have had other books which are not for kids then, but that have moved faster with other publication houses. So it also depends on the publishing house that you use. And of course, with this book, I was also targeting schools. I wanted it to go to school children. And so I had to use an avenue that would go to schools as well.
That's nice. Like one of my question was with owning and writing our own stories.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find like the impact you can tell, like encourage people with the impact it comes with, like passing from one generation to the other, passing stories?
Yes, I think so, and I think that's very important. If you look at the Finns and how they really relate with their stories, you'll see how important it is to have our own stories and tell them in our own ways and own them. And I like the Finnish pride with their things. And also when we go to Sweden, they also have this pride when they own their own books. And this reminds me, I could share this story. We went to uh, this place where we have Lindgren's book. There's this author Lindgren for the Pisa Posu, is it? Pepi, the book about Pepi, and it's about this girl, and they have a whole museum in Stockholm that's really themed on that storybook. And what they have actually done is when you go to that museum, they have a story train that tells the story of Pepe, of that girl, and it's really interesting. But besides the story train, they also have a theater in the same museums. So you'd have the story train telling one part of the story, and then you retire. You go to the theater after, I think they have a schedule of events that you go to that theater, and then you watch a part of that same story. Now, again, in this theater that is modeled with the setting and the characters of that particular story. And then you see how ownership actually builds up there. And so when parents take their kids to those spaces, you develop patterns. Those kids will also take their kids there. And so this story becomes a part of childhood and parenting or family way of doing things that we always enjoy this story and we always read it together, and we always go to watch this story at this particular place. So for example, I think it would be nice for me to also have a story train concept of this book, and I'll borrow this from the museum that's done this in Stockholm, because I think that tells the story in a way that someone never forgets. My daughters went there when they were 7, and they've never forgotten that story. Anytime they see any image of Pepe, they always remember her, because they saw it and they related with it on another level. And so I think we need to find ways of having these stories being passed in a way that the kids also start becoming a part of this and being conscious of who they are. And I think our identity is being eroded, especially when we migrate uh, and settle in new countries, because our children become less of who we are, and their children will become lesser of who we are. And then, within 4 or 5 generations, they will be almost completely detached with who we were. And so it becomes easier to then lose that part of us that is also, I think, important to know. But then they could relate with it at least through stories. Yeah, we've forgotten our, language, but we know this is our family story because it's from where we came from. We don't speak any mother tongue. We do not relate with any of their cultural practices and beliefs and name it. But we know this was our story, and it's always read, in our family from one generation to another. And of course, depending on how it's told, then still, I think there's always that pride in knowing who you are.
Do we have any other questions? Or I will start picking. Or do we have any upcoming authors in the chat? You can ask questions.
I can see so many names, and I think everybody, especially from the different countries, I know we all have different stories from our own countries, and our children do not have the pleasure of, enjoying those stories because maybe they were narrated to us when we were younger. I think what we can do now that we are in Finland is we can write those stories, and one cheaper avenue for keeping our stories is you can just have these free blogs and write your story and keep it there. And if one day you have funding, or if you can sponsor yourself to then produce it, you can actually go ahead and produce it. And some of our stories were never very long stories. The stories that could fit some 40, 50 pages or even 30 pages some of the time, if you add in with a few images here and there. So you can actually write a story in just under a week. Actually, in a day, you could, or two, you could write a whole story from different, So I've also written other stories that I haven't published because publishing is quite an expensive thing. And of course, I've also had, I've also been invited to share stories by other publication houses that publish for you for free, and then they pay you royalties. Of course, that's the best avenue. Also, yeah, it means you need to start somewhere so that someone could spot you or could see you, and then they can ask you to actually join. Especially for me, because I targeted an avenue that is institutionally driven and linked to education sector, then those that write books for schools reach out to me and ask me if I can write about certain themes that, can you write for us about this theme? Do you have any stories around tales of this nature and so forth? And of course, you need time to always write those, and they can ask for a number of stories. We need 4 stories because they are short stories, and maybe they want to compile it into one book with maybe several short stories. So my recommendation, the cheapest way to start is have them in the free blogs, but you can always migrate them. If you know how to promote it, you can even promote the blog with those short stories. You can promote it within Finland. You can promote it within the country association that's affiliated with you, because then that country identifies with the story faster. But also, I think there are many people who are interested to read generally. There are those who saw my book and ordered a number to just go and distribute them in some schools in their locality. Actually, when I look statistically at, for instance, in Kenya, the people who order the books, it's the rich, but the book is meant really for the poor. It's 350 shillings, Kenya shillings, that's like around 2 euros. That's the cost of the book, which means any school can actually own the book and have it in its library. And most of the average families can actually buy the book and have it. So some schools have actually ordered the book and ordered it as part of the curriculum, and that means all the pupils are asked to buy the book. And of course, those are middle class sort of schools, which makes it easy because then they can afford it. But the people who buy the book, majority are from the upmarket country areas of Kenya. Like you'll see it's going to Runda for Kenyans who know what, that you see most orders go to Runda or Mudaiga. And that shows the people who are really, the rich, let me say, have their kids reading things. The people who know things are trying to have their kids read as much as possible. They're having their kids read everything. But you see, I want every kid to have access to this book. And of course, for Finland, if people ask me that they're trying to buy the book, I always say, you can get it from the library, because the book version that we have for Finland is quite expensive. And of course, there are people who've ordered that book. Even recently, when it was advertised on Think Africa that we would be having the launch, I had people ordering like 5 books in one go and 3 books, and because some birthday is coming up and they want to give it to someone and so forth. So I think that's been quite some good reception. But I think I encourage all of us that can write to just write our stories and try to distribute or share them whichever way we can. It doesn't have to go through the books at the onset. It could also go through a blog at the onset.
Ekaterina is asking, do you know how big part of your book audience in Finland is non-Kenyan readers? And would you like other immigrants or Finns to learn of your stories, or is your main target people with Kenyan background?
So stories are for everyone, and stories basically make us aware about diversity. So writing the book in Finland was part of my contribution towards diversity, actually. I always say, as I mentioned earlier, integration is something that I find important to also address. And one avenue that we can also use to address diversity is when we have our stories within the Finnish libraries. When we have our stories in the libraries, they're open to everyone. And my target is to have actually everyone read these stories, because then you get to understand who are these other people and what were their stories, and how have they built themselves up over the years. So the stories, I currently I do not know how it performs with regards to who are the most readers, but I would say it is open to everyone, and it's good to, when we appreciate diversity and different stories, then we learn more to also be tolerant of others, but also just to know about other people and their stories.
We have one question.
Yes.
I will let you answer it. Will it be problematic if someone outside the culture tried to assume the perspective of an African voice?
I think we have other voices. If I could start with that, we have the Chinese voices, we have the Indian voices, and we have perceptions of those as well. Whenever when people make certain stereotypical jokes or wherever, you can always use the voices. But I think if it depends on how we have the perceptions or employed. If you do it in a way that I would perceive it to be positive, then in that case, it's fine. Remember, I was talking of the audiobook being done with the sort of Luo intonation. If a Spaniard were to read a Spanish storybook and he was to read it in English, I think it would sound fun to me if it was read in their Spanish accent, because it's a Spaniard telling the story of the Spaniards, but in English. So adding the accent to it just makes it adds a bit of authenticity to it. So yes, I think it's fine to add an African voice to it, and that should not be taken to mean, of course, that it needs to be done in a way that someone will not misconstrue it to be, being an undermining tone, or having some prejudice or something like that. Yeah.
Will you tell us if we want to get a hold of your book here in Finland, where would we go? Which library, or if we want to buy it?
Yeah, one easiest way of getting it is when you type on Google, it will tell you all the stores that have it. But you can go to Prisma. I think they don't have the book in store, but if you tell them, then they'll always bring it to you in the particular Prisma right next to you. Then Adlibris is a very popular bookstore. You can get it from there. There are quite a number of other bookstores, because you can't get it from the back, sort of the Kyria issues that I was talking about, which has a new name. I'll share that, which you can send later in the Think Africa WhatsApp group. So you cannot buy directly from the company that distributes, but they distribute to these bookstores and libraries and others, and you can get it from there. You can also get the book on Amazon. I think it's about $3 or something. So I've tried to make sure that if you cannot get a physical copy, at least you can get a virtual copy. So in terms of getting the book, there are all avenues for an individual to actually access a copy of the book. But yes.
Okay. We're almost winding up. So if anybody has a question, now is the time. Do not go home while regretting, or do not leave the conversation with a lingering question. As we wind up, Frank, could you give us a summary of, because some people have joined in late, so you can give us a summary, and then maybe after that, if we do not have any questions, I have some few announcements. Then I have a surprise announcement. So after that, maybe we can wind up. But Frank, go on.
Yeah, so in summary, we have the book, The Great Lwanda Magere, and it's a book that tells the story about an African warrior. I would easily simplify it as the Superman in an African folktale, or the Batman or the Spider-Man sort of version of an African story, and it it basically we have this warrior called Lwanda Magere who's defending his community, who's protecting his people, but he has his superpower hidden in his shadows. So in his shadow. So if anybody attacks him physically, you cannot battle him. But his secret, the secret of his strength is in his shadow. And it's betrayal that brings him down, that a lady is used to get the secret of his power. And then that lady becomes the conduit for his betrayal, which leads to his ultimate death, because then the lady reveals the secret, and then someone, like the picture in the background behind you there, there's someone's, pointing the arrow towards the shadow, because that's where the power is. And so they are, dismantling his power. They're killing him by attacking where his secret power rests. So yeah, that's about the book in summary. But of course, it has a number of interesting twists when you read the book. And the book can be found in the bookstores within Finland. If you Google the book, that's the easiest way to know where to get it if you need a copy. But I think I can also distribute the books in my own capacity. A number of people have written to me and asked for the book, and I have just shipped it to them. So if you need the book, you can also write to me. And the small book, I think it's the cheaper book. If you want it shipped to your address for 10 euros, I just get it and send it directly to your address. But I recommend asking from the library, get the bigger book. It's really a beautiful book. Even holding it, you feel like you really are holding something really valuable, and yeah, you just enjoy. And it has very nice pictures, and of course it's bigger, but they're exactly the same content. The big book, the small book, the content is 100% similar. Only difference is it feels nicer with the bigger one. It's more glossy, it's nice hardcovers, it's beautiful. And we have the ebooks as well on Amazon. So you can also get it on Amazon. And for the Kenyans, they can actually, when they travel to Kenya, you can go and get it from the Nuria bookstores or from Longhorn for 350 bob, which is about 2 euros or less. Yeah.
Yes, we have a few feedbacks before I add on to what I wanted to say. Emma was saying thank you a lot for this. It was great. And Ekaterina was saying thank you and congratulations on the success of your book in Kenya and Finland. And Hannah is saying, I think it's really wonderful to hear about Frank's journey. Such an inspiration. I will put in a request, wish for a reading at my local library store. Also, I wanted to say, maybe Frank, and Feven is saying thank you, Frank and Charity. Also, I was thinking, because I had this idea, which I was waiting for summertime to have like a reading with the Vende book, the one she wrote, and we can include you and have like, I think, Africa Kids Corner where you can come and read. But I'm still thinking of how to go about it, but it's going to be during this summer, so I will advertise it in the near future, and I hope all of you can come with your small ones. It's going to be on a Saturday. And as we are about to end, Roberto is saying thank you, looking forward to read the book.